And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
Welcome, everybody. I have a special guest for you tonight because I know you love to have near-death experiencers from different cultures. Today we have David Wallace from Hawaii to talk about his near-death experiences. David, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome.
Aloha, everybody.
All right, David. So if you don't mind, let's just start with the most impactful NDE for you.
Actually, I'll start off with my first NDE.
Okay.
Because actually it was the base, it formed the base of, future things to come. And it opened up a brand new world for me. So this first NDE occurred when I was 5 years old. And the way it happened, my brother and I were playing in the old cars, and he kicked me from one side of the car to the other side while we were moving on the road. And I reached back to catch myself, and instead of grabbing something secure, I grabbed the door handle, which opened when you pull down. And so the door swung open and pulled me out of the car. And I went shooting out of the car and landed head first on the road. Now, the first thing I recall, as soon as I hit the road, I felt no pain, but I felt like a separation. My body went one way, and it seemed that my conscious and my awareness went a different way. It pulled away. I could feel myself pulling back, like I was trying to avoid from falling. And actually what happened at that moment, my spirit left my body. And so for a few seconds, less than a minute, I saw myself looking down. I felt myself looking down at this poor boy. And this little kid was on the ground, and blood was coming from his head, and it was just out. And it took me a while to realize that this person on the ground was me. And as soon as I realized that, I started looking around. And although I knew where I was pretty close to home. The surroundings, the area around me, the colors, everything was different. It looked different. It was bright, vibrant. The colors were alive. And there were strange things, forms, kind of like shadowy things that began to move closer towards me. And that made me afraid. And as soon as I felt myself feeling afraid and pulling away from this situation, I felt scared. I felt someone reach from behind and pull me in with his hands, and I could see his big hands in front of me and pulling me close. And when I looked back, there was this huge Hawaiian man. And he smiled at me and just grasped me and held me tight in his arms. And we were zipping through the air. And he took me away from this space because, I was scared. And so as I started traveling with him, we were zipping through space like we're flying like a rocket. And that's how it felt. I could feel like things brushing by me, lights were zipping past. And it seems that there are all kind of different colors, dark, white, yellow, blues, and all of these colors kind of like rushing by me. And we're gone for just a few, minutes or so. And I felt like, wow, finally I get to be like Superman, and I'm flying and I'm moving really quick. And finally we reached this one place, and there was a bright light shining. And he took me towards the light, and the light went down into a hole, looked like a hole in the ground, and went down a shaft. And in the shaft, as I started looking around, it looked like we were going down into a cave. And actually, I remember thinking, where am I going? Am I going to hell? Because it looked like I was going in the earth. And finally, when we reached the bottom of the shaft, what it turned out to be was a small room. And if I was to measure the room, it was probably about 8 by 8, but it was a shaped in an octagon, like a stop sign. And he had windows and doors around. And that's where he kept me. And at first I started looking around, wondering what this room was. And he and I started talking, and I asked him what was this place and why I was there. And he told me that this is a safe place and I'm there mainly for my protection. And I asked him, protecting from what? So he pointed outside of the windows and the doors. And their windows looked like glass or plexiglass. And as I started looking out, outside, it was really dark, but it was illuminated only by the light that was coming from inside of our room. And as it shined outward, I could see a big empty space, a cavern. But as I began staring outward, I noticed that there were shadows. The same kind of shadows that I saw around the car. That's what was happening, as of the shadows. And I didn't know what it was, but it was human shape. And the shadows kept on coming closer, closer, closer until they came right up to the window. And as soon as they came up close to the window, and I started looking at these people. There were people, and I looked at them, and they looked kind of familiar. And I thought that they were family members. They could have been family members. And they started calling me. I said, come outside, David. Yeah, come. And so I walked up to the window and I tried to open the door. And as soon as I touched the doorknob, the big man came and snatched me away from the door and says, no, stay inside here. You don't want to go out. And so I asked him, why? Why can't I go out? These people are, look like they're my relatives. And he said, no, they're not. Take a look again. Take a second look. And tell me who's missing. So as I started looking among the people that were there, and I looked at my caretaker, and I says, yeah, funny, my grandpa is not out there. My grandparents, they're not out there. My great-grandparents, not there. And so I said, yeah, because these guys are not who they are, who they think they are. And so I backed away from the window and backed away from the door. And as soon as I did that, people outside turned into real mean-looking creatures, very demonic in appearance. They didn't morph into beasts or whatever. It's just that their facial features changed. They were no longer happy and inviting me, but they were threatening. They were mad. They were angry at me for not wanting to join them. And so basically I was schooled. I spent, it seemed like a long time that I was in the room. And I had conversations about with the man about my name, my Hawaiian name, Imaikalani, what it meant. And it was supposed to be a guide for my life. And so we discussed that. And eventually, after being in the room for a while, I felt really tired. And I went to take a nap. And the next thing I know, I woke up in a hospital, and that ended my first NDE. So in this NDE, I found out that when people are kind of like in limbo, there's a safe place that you can go, and especially if you're guided by an ancestor.
Thank you for sharing that experience, David. Is it common within Hawaiian culture for people to talk about NDEs or out-of-body experiences?
Yes. In fact, some of the Hawaiians refer to this as uhane lele, or the spirit walk, and or uhane holo, something like that. But there's many instances where people will find themselves astral projecting from place to place. Our kahunas on the island of Molokai and throughout Hawaii, they had this ability to be at multiple places at the same time. They could project their images all around the islands and be at different places at the same time. So these were things that, we're taught. If I was raised in an ancient culture, the things that we're talking about would be common.
Do you have any idea who your Hawaiian protector was?
Sure. I've seen him. I've seen this man several times since then. And he's one of my ancestors, very important ancestor that is a kahuna nui. And he has been with me from that moment until now. So he's still with me all the time. The Hawaiians call this an aumakua, or family guardian.
What about the demon-like beings? Do they have a name for that?
Well, the Hawaiian name for mischievous spirits is lapu lapu kolohe, or the naughty spirits. They're the ones that cause problems. And there's a difference too between the spirits of the deceased people. They will have identities, they will have their personalities, and very recognizable. But you also have spirits that are unborn, and so they can morph into anything that they want.
Can you tell us about the traditional spirituality or religion of the people, of the native people of Hawaii, and what that is?
Actually, the concept of a Hawaiian religion is a foreign idea, because religious practices were very individual. It depended upon your family beliefs, because each family would have different things that were sacred to them. And they would have their own family guardians. Like my aumakua is a family member. It's not some kind of God that's not out there. So this is very personal. So the Hawaiian spiritual practices were very specific to the individual and the family. For example, if I was a fisherman, the most important environment for me would be the ocean. So I'd make sure that the gods of the ocean, the fish that I'm fishing, the place, and I pay respect to those so that my fishing expeditions will be successful. I'll be safe on the ocean. Kanaloa is one of the gods of the ocean, so I pay respect to them. And there's a ku-god for Ku'ahu'ula. That's a fisherman's god. I would be praying to them. So it's very specific. If you grow taro on land and you're not going into the ocean, your spiritual practices are different from mine.
All right, if you don't mind, then let's move on to your second NDE.
Okay, second NDE occurred after I returned from Chicago in 1979, I believe. And it was the worst snowstorm, and I was up there for an entire week, I believe. And I got sick. And upon returning to Hawaii, I developed double pneumonia. And so I was out of work for a bit, and I was a policeman at that time. And so one night I was feeling so bad and my temperature was really high and I felt so lousy. I told my wife before I went to bed, it says, I don't think I'm going to make it. So I kissed her and she said, stop doing that. I said, no, I think I'm going to die. And that's what I told her. So I went to bed with that in mind. I was resigning to die. And I would be happy if I had gone at that time, I guess. So while I'm sleeping, I felt somebody pull my toe on my foot, the big toe. And among Polynesians, that's the way we wake up the spirit. If you find a person sleeping, you pull on their toe and their spirit wake up. And that's what happened to me. I got out of bed and I looked to the foot of my bed and there stood my friend, Bruce. Now, this man, I had gone hunting with him about a couple months before that. And shortly after the hunting accident, he passed away. So he was dead. And however, that night when he pulled on my toe and I jumped out of my body, I looked at him and I hugged him and I started crying. And finally I realized he's dead. So I pushed back and says, Bruce, you can't do, what's going on? Am I dead too? So he says, no, Dave, I wanted to show you something. And I says, okay, show me. So he walked us on the side of my bed and opened up our closet. And when he opened up the closet, there was our clothes. Stick his hand inside the closet and separated the clothes. And when he parted the clothes, I saw a big hole, huge hole in the back of the closet. And he says, that's what I wanted to show you. And I started looking at him and I could see this long tunnel and dark where we were. But as you look further in, there's this small piece of light out there at the end of the tunnel. And he invited me into the tunnel and says, come, I want to show you something. So I agreed and walked through. And this tunnel wasn't a straight path. It was kind of like zigzagging, going, turning, twisting and turning. However, every turn that we made, the place got brighter and brighter. And came to the point where it was so bright, like we were walking in the sun. And I looked at my hand and I noticed my clothing changed. Instead of wearing my pajamas, I was wearing this white cloth and as I brushed my hand over, it felt like feathers, almost like a bird. And it was loose and kind of like fluttering. And when I passed my hand over, I could feel something like electricity coursing through my fingers. And I thought, wow. And right at that moment, when I could feel that energy coursing through me, my breathing issues that I had, the pain in my chest, my fever was gone. And it's the best feeling I ever had. I was just elated, filled with energy. And the strongest thing I felt inside there was a feeling of love. I was being loved. The brighter the light got, the stronger I felt this love. When he finally reached the end of the tunnel, there was a membrane, and it kind of like reminded me of the birth sac, where you can see through, but it's kind of cloudy. And so I started looking through this, and I could see an entire new world, different world on the other side of this membrane. It was the greenest grass I ever seen, most beautiful trees, flowers, and the sun that was there was a bright light coming in, and I could just feel overwhelmed by it. And the first thing off to the left, I see people started coming over a hill. And as they got closer, I recognized all of the people that was there. They were my ancestors. going back for a long time. And as a group, they were coming, and there were thousands of them. And I was really excited to see them. However, the next thing that I saw made me even more excited was I started hearing barking, dogs barking, you know. And I looked to the side, and from behind the group, all of these animals started running towards me. And I looked at them, and they were pets that I had from the time I was a little kid that had passed away a long time ago. And they were there, and they ran up to the membrane, and they were trying to jump on me, and they couldn't come through. And I'm over there trying to reach down and grab them, but my friend is holding me back, says, "No, Dave, stay." And so I started bawling. And my ancestors were calling me. Says, "David, John, come. And my dogs were, and my pets, guinea pigs, pigeons, all of the pets that I had were there, right there. And I wanted to join them. In fact, I took one step through the membrane, and I could almost feel it reach right through the place. And then I felt my friend grab me from the behind and grab my shoulder. And once he touched me, I heard a voice coming from the other end of the tunnel. And it was the voice of my daughter saying, "Daddy, where are you?" Mm. And so hearing the voice calling me, "Daddy, where are you?" I stepped back, and my friend pulled me out of the memory. And I looked at my friend and said, "I cannot go through right now." And we hugged and I kissed him. And I said, "Thank you for showing me this." And he told me that he wished he had made the same decision I was making, because it looked like he had a choice of going or staying. He chose to go, and I chose to go back. So we cried, and it was the saddest feeling that I ever had. And I woke up crying in my bed. And when I woke up, not only crying, I felt my bed and it was soaking wet. The fever I had broken, and I got well from that moment on. But ever since that dream and stuff, it changed my perspective about death. I'm no longer afraid of it.
So it sounds like your pneumonia was healed during your NDE. What else about your perspective of death changed after that?
Well, when we think about heaven, we only think about a place for human beings. Mm-hmm. But when I saw my pets, I said, wow, our pets are there. And when you think about it, pets are totally innocent, And so them being in heaven makes total sense.
After any of these NDEs, did you notice that you had any new abilities that you haven't had before?
Yes. After the first near-death experience I had, I started noticing if people tried to hide things from me, and if I put my mind to it, I could see what they had. And I used to go to birthday parties, and people would bring their presents. And me being a real curious kid, I used to stare at the presents, and I could see what was in the box. Mm. And I tell the people, "Hey, this is a toy, or this is a book, or this is a piece of clothes. Well, tell me the color then, if you can see it." And I name them right exactly what it was. For me, books is the easiest one because I love books.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, let's move on to your next one.
The third one occurred, and this is the one that some people think it's a dream. I think it is an experience. So, and for this one, I was in my 40s and I got sick. I had spinal meningitis, avian flu, and my blood had turned septic. And I tried to handle it my way by staying home and just drinking water and as much as I could. But I got so weak, I decided to go to the doctor. And on the way out of the house, I fell through the window. And luckily, one of the gardeners that was out there, heard the commotion and called the ambulance and rushed me to the hospital. When I got there, and they started hooking me up, and I was rushed to ICU. Eventually, the doctor that came in to take a look at me told me if I was about 20 minutes later coming into the hospital, he couldn't guarantee my life. I was that close to death. And at that time, I was in a bad place. In fact, I was kind of partial suicidal. I didn't care if I lived or died. And so I wasn't taking good care of myself. So when I was in ICU, there's so many medications coming into me. The IV bags was just lying all the way down. They had 2 sets of IV things going on to me, and I had tubes running into me all over. But on the first night there, I started looking around, and I could see spirits beginning to gather around my bed. And these were ancestral spirits. And for Hawaiians, when we start seeing ancestral spirits, especially close ones that we know, that's not a good sign for you. You're ready to go. They're coming to guide you. They're your guides to the next world. So I knew I was in trouble. And so when I fell asleep, I had a really strange dream. And in this dream, I saw myself in a cemetery. And I looked around and I was trying to get out of the cemetery and I couldn't find the gate. And the gates were too tall for me to climb, and it was dark, and it just looked mean. I started running around trying to find a place, and finally, I was running blind, and I fell in a hole. When I fell in a hole, I looked up, and there was a stone marker on the grave with my name. I had fallen into my own grave. And so I climbed out and everything, and I got out and I started crying at the grave. I said, no, I don't want to go. Right around then, a really, really handsome young man appeared in my dream, and he was dressed in a beautiful black suit with a top hat. And he came to me and he spoke perfectly. And when I looked at him, he called me, hello, David. He knew my name. And I asked him, who are you? He says, I'm death and I'm come for you. And I looked at him and I says, no, I'm not ready to go. Yes, so I stood up and I ran. And as I ran, I looked back towards this man. And in the back, I could see 4 animals start charging and coming and chasing after me. And as they got closer to me and I started running, they looked like big Dobermans, black Dobermans, mean, and they were ready to, chew me up. So I started running, and I was looking for a place where I could stand and fight against these dogs. And I saw a huge tree, and I ran up to the tree, and I braced myself against the tree, and the dog started attacking me. And as soon as the first one bit into me, I felt this rage inside of me build up. And this rage turned me into something powerful. I could see myself grow huge. And eventually my hands became claws. My mouth became filled with huge teeth. And I look at my hands and my legs. I realized I was a giant werewolf. So the dogs that were biting at me, one of them was biting me. I grabbed him and bit off his head and spit it towards this handsome man, and just threw the dog on the side. The other dogs saw what I did, and they started. One of them continued the attack, so I squashed him. And then the third dog, again, I just caught him in the air and squished it like a tomato. The last surviving dog ran away, killed Tuck in the back. And after I did that, I was still morphed into this huge werewolf, and I'm ready to fight. And this man comes up, walking to me, clapping his hand. Says, "Congratulations, way to go." And I look at him and said, "What? Why are you doing that for?" And he says, "Well, look like you got something to fight for. Life has meaning for you." He says, "Yeah." And at that time, I had just met my wife that I'm married to now. And she was the bright spot in my life. And I feel this is what gave me the spark to fight for my life. And this man who was deaf said that he was really glad to see me fighting for my life and I have a purpose in life. And he said, "I'll let you go and I'll catch you next time."
You said in the beginning of this experience, you were already down and unhappy in life. Do you think that this guy was just testing you?
Oh, yeah. Life has been a constant test for me on what I intend to do, and if I have the guts to do the things that I need to. And this experience was actually a turning point at me. I had to make a decision, stay in a relationship that I wasn't happy with and wasn't good for me, or change a relationship and get with a woman that will support me 100%. Because I tell you what, if I wasn't married to my wife now, the man I'm here right now would not exist.
All right, well, let's go on to your next one.
Okay, that's the third one, right?
Mm-hmm. People are going to be getting jealous how you've got to have so many and they haven't had any.
Yeah, the final near-death experience occurred. If you could see my chest up here,
Mm-hmm.
I have a scar, and I had triple bypass and open heart surgery, and this was 11 years ago. Actually, 12 years ago, 2010, I had surgery. Surgery was planned. It's supposed to take about 3.5 to 4 hours. Surgery ended up going over 7.5 hours.
Wow.
And later I found out that when I tried talking to the surgeon, he says, "Why did it take so long? Why did it take 7.5 hours?" And my poor wife was waiting for me at the hospital all that time. So she must have been really worried. And all the surgeon said was, "There were complications." And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, right." By then I had gathered myself to realize what had happened. But I remember myself being put under. The anesthesiologist came and injected me and asked me to start counting. I think I just said 100 and supposed to count backwards. I just remember saying 100 and I was gone. But sometime during the surgery, I felt jolted. And, like sometimes when you're sleeping and there's something that's shocking, or you panic in your dream and your whole body jolts and you jump up. That's what I felt. And I couldn't understand it. So I jumped out of my body and I started looking around. And I found myself in a room, dark in a room. There's light going on. And I seen people in blue walking around this table frantically, doing things. And I saw a man lying down on a table, his chest open up. And these guys are having pedals, and trying to shock this guy. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy must be in bad shape. Poor thing. It didn't dawn on me that was me. And so I started watching more, and I moved around, and I came up by the person's head, and I looked, and that's when I realized it was me. And again, panic overcame me. I was scared. I knew this guy was in trouble. And so as soon as I panicked and I started looking around, I started to looking around for guides, spirit guides, maybe coming to pick me up. But same thing happened to me when I had my first NDE. From behind, this huge hand came around and grabbed me. This time, it wasn't as big when I was little, but it was a monstrous hand. This man reached across and pulled me and took me through the roof, through the operating room, and we ended up above the hospital. And this hospital is located close to downtown Honolulu. And so I could see everything around me. I've seen the businesses, I've seen the Honolulu International Center or the Blaisdell Center, I've seen the schools, the traffic and everything. And I look back and stuff and I says, where are we going? And it says, you remember the place? And we started zipping through the air and went right back to the same place where this man took me when I was 5. Deep down inside a cavern into a small little room. This time I'm much larger, so the fit was tight. And when we got there, there were 2 other people inside the room. There were other people inside the room. And they came to help this man manage me because now I'm a big adult. And but the same thing happened in the room. There's multiple sided rooms with windows and doors. And this time the people knew that I was hungry. So these demons that are outside, they're showing me delicious plate lunches, drinks, and trying to entice me to open up the door and join with them. And so these men inside was trying to keep me from opening up the doors and joining them. And after, when I finally conceded and say, okay, I'll stay with you folks, that's when the spirits on the outside turned mean. And they were pounding on the windows and rapping on the doors. Come on, Edie, we want to take you with us. We want to take you with us. And you don't belong in there. You belong out here with us. So that's the kind of stuff they were saying, trying to make me angry. So I would step outside. But my ancestors and protectors knew if I step outside.
What do you think would have happened to you if you did go outside?
I'd be one of the lapu-lapu kolohe roaming the earth, not being able to go to the land of the ancestors. I'd be one of the lost souls.
Were any of your NDE experiences more real than living life?
I think the one that seemed the most real was meeting death in the graveyard. It seems so real to me. In fact, when I woke up from that one, my one of the dogs bit me on my near my ankle. And when I woke up from that one, my ankle was hurting for several days.
Wow.
I don't know, could have banged it against the bed.
Yes. Are any of your NDEs fading from memory, or do you think about any one of them like almost every day?
Well, because of my work, I'm constantly advising people who have strange things happen to them. And, I just got a call earlier today about a person that may have a spiritual attachment on them, and that's creating problems with them. So anytime I deal with them, I'm taken back to my experiences with, the Lapu-Lapu Kolohe. So I'm constantly being reminded through the things that I work with and help people with. So yeah, it's the most difficult one to remember is the one that I had when I was 5 years old, because I'm 68, going to be 69 years old, right? So you're talking about something that happened about 63 years ago. And when it first happened to me, I tried to suppress it because everybody that I was telling them thought I was crazy, and I didn't want to be known as a crazy guy. So I kind of like suppress it and push it back. And the other NDEs occurred during my adulthood. So by that time, I really didn't care what people thought about me. So that seems to be the difference. So the first NDE was the one that required a lot of effort to recall. And in fact, I had to kind of like go through hypnosis to recall it.
Have you told your friends and family about your NDEs? And if so, how do they respond?
All of my family, my kids, my brothers, my brother and sisters, and close family members, they know about it. And for their response to that is, oh, that makes sense. Just like, okay. Anything else? Yeah, they're not surprised at all.
When you had your first NDE and you were outside of your body, did you happen to see your brother in the car?
Yeah, he wasn't in the car. He as soon as I hit the road and the car stopped, he came running out and he was crying like a little girl. I was teasing him about that later.
Oh, yeah.
He's crying, I'm sorry, and just panicking. And one of my cousins, older cousins, was driving the car and she was in panic mode. And so fortunately, there was a car behind us, and they knew me, but they didn't have that emotional attachment, so they could respond better. So they're the ones that actually took care of me while I was on the ground, making sure that I wasn't moved until the ambulance came.
Was your cousin and your brother surprised when you told them, I saw you crying and I saw you panicking?
Yeah, they didn't. They looked at me kind of like, how'd you know that? Says, I was there. I was up. No, you weren't. You're out cold. So no, I was watching you folks all the time. And so they couldn't explain it, and they felt kind of spooked out about it.
Yeah. Do you think that any of these experiences served as a template of what you would go on to do with the rest of your life?
Yes, in fact, my perception of death, I like I said, I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid of death. And in my counseling with people, I've had over the years several people from the mainland US, and they come to Hawaii. Some of them are really, really sick, and in fact, they're near death themselves. They're ready to die, And for some reason, they come to Hawaii thinking that they'll find a kahuna that can snap the fingers and, heal them right away. And I've worked with a lot of them during that, who make that trip here, looking for a kahuna that can heal them. And when I run into these people, I can see, and depending on the stage, some of them are savable. I don't see the ancestors around them. And, they still have time to make the necessary corrections. But the ones that come to me that already have their ancestors following them, they see them, they feel them. They're beginning to talk to the aunts or uncles or mothers and fathers in the dreams. And these people are inviting them to the next dimension already. Those are the ones that I try and calm their fears, and I share my near-death experiences with them and say, the next step in our evolution is something wonderful, something to look forward to. And I talk to them about the pets. And it's really interesting because they're more excited to see their pets than their relatives, So they're excited. And by the time I leave with them, their attitude about death is they're walking away with peace in their mind. So there's been many of them like that.
So are you a spiritual counselor, and that's how people search you out?
Yes. In Hawaii, I'm called a kahu. And a kahu is something similar to a holy man or a spiritual person. And the term kahu is considered to be a caretaker. So it's our job it's our responsibility to care for people, to help them heal, to help them make important decisions and bring comfort to their lives. So that's the role that I play in this community.
Would that be similar to a shaman in the Native American community?
Very similar. In fact, I've worked with a Native American shaman before.
Do you work with anything herbal or anything like ayahuasca?
No, my approach is pure energy. And pure energy, taking care of the flow of energy in the body, restoring energy, restoring connections that were lost. And some people call me a medical intuitive, where I use my skills in remote viewing and as a Reiki master. I am a Reiki master too. So I combine both of those when I'm dealing with someone who is ill. I can sense where their injury or illness is, and I could see the effects that it's causing upon the body, so that when I do send healing energy, it's very pinpoint.
I believe you're also a tarot reader.
Yes.
How do you implement that into what you're doing?
Well, the tarot cards help me express the things that come to me intuitive anyway. It's just that for me, it's like notes from my subconscious or from spirit to help me give the best counsel to the people. So I do healing spreads, health spreads, and things like that. And it's a tool. I also use dowsing pendulums to locate illness or injury. That works really well too.
All right. Well, if people want to find out more about you, what is the best way they should do that?
Sure. On Facebook, if you're on Facebook, you can just contact me. I'm Kahu Dave, Kahu Dave, Dave. And I do have a website. It's called www.intuitiveinsightshawaii. So you can contact me either way.
I didn't mention it, but you're also an author of the book, The Journey of Our Souls. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All of the 4 near-death experiences are covered in my book with more detail. In fact, that's the reason why I wrote it. And it talks about my journey and the things that I learned and developed that can be traced back to these NDEs, because for each NDE, I came away with not only new insights, but also new skills that I began to develop. And so there's multiple skills that came out each time I had a near-death experience. It's an awakening.
All right, well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Actually, for my experience with the NDE, what it told me is, what it showed me is that life is a very precious gift that we have. And whatever life we have, whether we think it's a good life or something that could improve, just being living and among the living is a blessing. So we need to count it as a blessing no matter what's happening in our lives. For me, there's a lot of health issues that I suffer, and I can feel sorry. I have the choice of either feeling sorry for myself or accepting what happens and live the best life I can, with these things. And I choose to be an optimist and enjoy life and see the good in everything.
David, thank you for that message, and thank you so much for being our guest this evening. I really appreciate you, and I wish you a wonderful day in Hawaii.
Oh yeah, it's very wonderful, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right, take care, and God bless you.
Aloha.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.